is crisscrossed by an amazing network of ancient trackways. These remarkable routes are our oldest roads and have been travelled for more than 5,000 years.
That is an extraordinary place.
Walked by pilgrims and traders, hunters and invaders, Celts, Romans, Saxons and Vikings, each track is bound up in myth, mystery and legend. This is it. It's quite a strange-looking monument. But what's the truth behind all these megaliths and burial sites and ley lines and hidden caves along these pathways? And why were their mystic origins such an attraction for later generations? I'm going to explore these tracks to connect the clues they've left hidden in the British landscape. Isn't this just about the best cave you've ever seen? Wow!
Her name is Majesty.
What other name could she have? This week, I'm in Kent to explore the North Downs Way, once trodden by Caesar's armies and medieval pilgrims. I want to know what this journey can tell me about the history and legend of ancient Britain through the secret monuments and sacred places along its track. These are the paths our ancestors would have followed, the ancient trackways that we can still walk today. This is Castle Hill in Kent, on the south coast of England, and it's where I'm starting my walk. Over here is Eurostar and the beginning of the big tunnel under the water. This is Folkestone. Beyond it is the English Channel, and beyond that, the start of the EU, quite a long way away now. And here is the beginning of the North Downs Way, great chalk escarpment. You can see a chalk cliff just there. This place has always been where traders, travellers, pilgrims meet up. And for thousands of years, if you wanted to get further inland, then you went along that pathway. The North Downs Way is thought to be one of the main highways that ancient travellers arriving in Britain would have used. From Folkestone, I'm going to follow it inland through Kent. I'll take the old pilgrim road to Canterbury before finishing my journey at Down House in the wild beauty of the rolling Kent Downs. Along the way, I'll discover one of Britain's oldest oak trees.
Gosh, it is lovely.
I'll make a pilgrimage to the shrine of Thomas à Becket, uncover a lost battle site of Julius Caesar, and marvel at the great discoveries of Charles Darwin.
I think that's really exciting.
All of which will reveal to me how this ancient track was once used. On the coast at Folkestone, my first stop is a 3,000-year-old archaeological find precariously balanced on a cliff edge and in a race against time. This is the very, very beginning of the North Downs Way. You can see the sea just there, and as you can imagine, it's eroding these cliffs really fast, which is why you've got this spoil heap here, and over here an archaeological site, because if this stuff isn't dug up pretty soon, it's going to end up at the bottom of the sea. But it turns out to be a really, really interesting site. Andrew, can I borrow you just for a moment?
Yeah, sure.
Andrew, there's a lot of these curved things here, curved stone things.
Yeah.
Can you explain to me what they are?
These are late Iron Age rotary quernstones.
That's grinding stones for corn.
Yeah, they're for grinding corn into flour to make make bread. Absolutely essential to daily life for everybody in the Iron Age, really.
But there must be more than one household, I would have thought. You've got... Well, how many have you got here? There must be at least a dozen.
At least a dozen, but actually from this site, we've probably recovered 300 or 400 over the years.
300 or 400?
Yeah.
So if you found so many, and so many that are broken, it sounds as though they're actually making them here.
Yeah, this is a really special thing about this site. This is the production site.
From what I know about archaeology, I would have thought that evidence of large-scale Iron Age production was pretty rare.
It is. This is probably the only quern production site that we've actually excavated.
This is the modern-day one?
This is the replica.
It's fascinating that 3,000 years ago, our ancestors were manufacturing these essential tools on an industrial scale and then distributing them throughout the country and beyond.
Start grinding it down.
I'll lift it up and let's see, because I think I can see some white there. Oh, fantastic.
Starting to happen, but it's quite hard work.
Yeah, but we can see it does work.
Yeah, it does work.
But what about the North Downs Way? Is there any evidence that they use that as a trading route?
Well, I think most of the querns produced here went out by sea, but we do find them inland in Kent, and you can't get by boat to Ashford. The only really, big, long-distance, strategic way we know of at that time was the North Downs Way.
So this is really exciting. Iron Age entrepreneurs were trading out of this busy site, dealing directly with Europe across the sea, but also taking their business inland along the North Downs Way. A lot of people say that Folkestone got its name from the fact that of all the places round here, that was the area where the folk got their stone. It's certainly a notion that would have appealed to the late 19th, early 20th century writer Hilaire Belloc, who, in a sense, was the man who rediscovered that pathway. In 1904, Belloc penned The Old Road to describe an ancient trackway across the North Downs. Born in France but raised in England, he was a prolific writer, a politician, and a devout Catholic. But he's also a poet I remember fondly from my childhood. He was an oddly charming and quite humorous man who wrote a book of kids' poems called The Cautionary Tales, and I used to recite one of the poems from it, which started, "The chief defect of Henry King was chewing little bits of string. At last he swallowed some which tied itself in ugly knots inside." But more to the point, he wrote this book, The Old Road, in which he argued that our pathway is actually a natural chalk ridge that runs all the way from Farnham to Dover. You may say that nature herself laid down the platform of a perfectly defined ridge, from which a man going west could hardly deviate, even if there were no path to guide him. Belloc walked this path himself and said it was the route that the medieval pilgrims took, the legendary Pilgrim's Way. And some pilgrims still come down here to this very day. The Pilgrim's Way is an ancient path thought to have been taken by medieval pilgrims to Canterbury. For several miles, it follows the same route to the cathedral city as the even older North Downs Way. Pilgrimages have always been journeys of spiritual significance, a connective link between holy places. And even today, modern pilgrims still travel this path to seek their own sacred places en route. Hello, traveller. Where are you going?
Well, I'm on pilgrimage.
A real pilgrimage?
Tony Robinson, I
Yes,
presume.
how do you do?
Nice to meet you. This is Nettle.
Hello, Nettle. Hello, darling.
This is for you, your pilgrim staff,
Thank you very much.
because
Thank
I
you.
believe we're going to make a pilgrimage together now.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent. Come on, Nettle, we're going.
come on, girl.
quill is part of a new movement set up to revitalise the tradition of pilgrimage in Britain. But these pilgrims welcome people of all faiths and no faiths side by side.
So, Tony, there's something rather special to show you here.
Right.
Because pilgrimage isn't just about churches, cathedrals, chapels, or the built environment, but the natural world as well.
Sure.
And what I'm going to show you now is very much a holy place.
Is it this tree up here?
Could it be anything else?
No, I don't think so. It's extraordinary. It's like a tree out of Tolkien, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Her name is Majesty,
What other name could she have?
and this is the largest virgin unpollarded oak in Britain, and some people say the world.
Do we have any idea how old she is?
Estimates between 800 and 1,000 years.
Yeah. God, it's really sensual going in this way, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Blimey.
And one of the key things in pilgrimage is to go slowly and to stop often.
Yeah.
In places like this, you may not pass this way again, Tony.
What does being a pilgrim mean to you?
Well, it means connecting to places like this, to things that are bigger than me, and doing it through a journey on foot.
It is lovely touching something alive that has been alive for the best part of 1,000 years.
And there's one more thing I like to do at a place like this, Tony, which is to give a gift. And I've brought one for you, actually. This is 925 British silver, 100 years old. And there's a hole on the other side of the tree. And we could just fling in our coin as some sort of gesture of humanity to non-humanity.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of absurd gesture that pilgrimage is all about.
Got a threepence for you. There you go. Don't spend it all at once. It is absurd, but it's very nice in a very gentle way, isn't it?
Back on the track, I enter King's Wood, an infamous place that offered perfect cover for the thieves and robbers that preyed upon pilgrims on the road. But very quickly, the trees clear. Relief for the pilgrims, I imagine, as they emerged over the brow of the hill.
There it is. The pilgrims' very first sight of their final destination, Canterbury Cathedral.
For devoted medieval pilgrims on their long, lonely journey across England, the beckoning call of the cathedral city of Canterbury was irresistible. In his book, The Old Road, Hilaire Belloc called Canterbury the rallying point of all the roads from the coast. Like many of the pilgrims, I'm following the track from the west through the North Downs. The magnificent cathedral at Canterbury is the oldest church in Britain still in use. In 595 AD, the Pope in Rome sent a Benedictine monk, Augustine, to bring Christianity to the pagan Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Kent. Augustine established a church and became the first Archbishop of Canterbury. Christianity took root in England over the next 500 years. But it wasn't until the death of Archbishop Thomas à Becket in 1170 that the tradition of pilgrimage would take hold.
Today, the 7th of July, is a special day in honour of St Thomas à Becket. That's why these candles are lit. They mark his shrine. He was an Archbishop of Canterbury, and he had a row with King Henry II, whose supporters murdered him, and Thomas became a saint. And it was to pay homage to him that all the pilgrims came here. And you can see how many there must have been. Look, can you see this sort of runnel here? That's tiles that have been eroded by the knees of all the pilgrims who've knelt in front of St Thomas. There must have been thousands and thousands of them.
And thousands of pilgrims making donations for the privilege of visiting the shrine meant good news for the church. Incredibly, even though it's almost 1,000 years ago, every penny was accounted for.
Here we have accounts for the year 1200 to 1201, and they detail the monies received as offerings at the various shrines and places in the cathedral.
What sort of money were they making?
Well, for the tomb itself, we've got the figure here of £431. So, assuming a donation of 1 penny per pilgrim, that is over 100,000 pilgrims, and that's just to the tomb. It's a very rough way of estimating.
Yeah, yeah. But I suppose some wealthy people would have come here and flashed the cash around and given far more than simply a penny.
Of course. This is a donation made by Louis VII, King of France, when he visited the cathedral in the year 1179, which is recorded in the charter. So Louis VII came to pray at Thomas's tomb for the recovery of his son, who was gravely ill. His son recovered, and as a thank offering, Louis issued this charter, and the charter grants the monks of the cathedral a large quantity of good French wine.
I bet they were happy about that.
I think they were delighted, yes.
Whether a humble worshipper or a visiting dignitary, one way or another, this was a spiritual tax on the faithful traveller. I'm back on the road out of Canterbury at the village of Harbledown. For centuries, this was the only road to London, and I can imagine paupers, pilgrims and princes all passing this way, and all happily buying into the cult of Thomas à Becket.
This hatch is brilliant. Inside it, in the Middle Ages, there was a holy relic, the shoe of St Thomas à Becket, which apparently he'd left in a nearby well. And if you were a pilgrim and you were walking past, and if you knocked on the hatch, it would open and a leper's hand would come out holding the shoe, and if you kissed it, then your life would be full of blessings, provided you gave the leper a few bob, of course.
The hatch is on the outside wall of a medieval leper hospital, where weary pilgrims would have passed. It's strange that a place like this would have been a resting point for travellers, but I've been told that there's something even more curious in the grounds.
I'm looking for a watering hole in this wood that apparently has royal connections. Why you'd have a watering hole in a wood, I've got absolutely no idea at all. Oh, Darcy. Wasn't in there at all. Look, it's here. Oh, I could have gone round the side and up that concrete path. Never mind. I love little things like this. It's a surprising little place in the corner of a field. You see those 3 feathers there on that headstone? That is the symbol of the Prince of Wales. And that is the well of the very first Prince of Wales, the Black Prince, who was a bit like our Prince William, only slightly more butch.
Edward of Woodstock, aka the Black Prince, was a gallant hero of the 100 Years' War with the French. His legend born from the iconic black armour he wore into battle. He was also very devout and would make a pilgrimage before any military campaigns, offering penance for those his army were about to kill.
The story goes that towards the end of his life, he had this really bad eye affliction, and he was coming past this place, which was already a popular drinking place for the pilgrims on their way to Canterbury, and he dipped his hands into the water and pressed his fingers onto his eyes, and they were miraculously cured. Back on the North Downs Way, a few miles further on, I'm travelling far back in time and to a fabled site of hidden history. "1,500 years before the Black Prince's army rode through here, and 600 years before Augustine established Christianity in Britain, it wasn't Canterbury that dominated this landscape. It was the Celtic stronghold at Bigbury. And by following the North Downs Way into the heart of this woodland, I'm walking on the warpath of one of Rome's most famous sons, Julius Caesar. In the late summer of 55 BC, the legions of Caesar's expeditionary force were the first Romans to set foot in Britain. Lured back the following year by tales of an island rich in pearls, lead and gold, Caesar landed at Deal in Kent and is said to have launched his first attack at a fort near Canterbury. There's no physical evidence of Caesar in Britain, but he wrote an account of the campaign, and it's traditionally thought that the big battle took place just up there. And I think you'll see why. Caesar had a fearsome reputation in Britain, and the Celts knew they'd have little chance against the impressively equipped Roman army unless their defence was carefully planned. This place is called Bigbury, and you see that slope up there? That's a defensive earthwork, and this is what Caesar said about the battle in his conquest of Gaul. A night march of about 12 miles brought Caesar, he always refers to himself in the third person singular, Caesar rather than I, in sight of the enemy with their cavalry and chariots, and tried to bar his way by attacking from a position on higher ground. Now, this is the important bit. Repulsed by his cavalry, they hid in the woods, where they occupied a well-fortified post of great natural strength, since all the entrances were blocked by felled trees laid close together. Well, there's no doubt that that is a seriously engineered piece of ancient British fortification, isn't it? It's so tempting to think of Caesar's legions marching on Bigbury against the Celts. But is there any real evidence beyond Caesar's account to support this? I've come to meet Steve Willis, who's a local archaeologist and has done a lot of very good work on Bigbury. Steve, are there any other candidates for this Roman battle? Any other Iron Age hill forts of comparable size around here?
No, Tony, this is a unique site in eastern Kent. There aren't any strongholds of the late Iron Age around here for miles.
This does fit in with the Caesar story.
Exactly.
The other thing that Caesar mentions is this 12-mile overnight walk. Does that make sense?
It brings us exactly to this spot.
From where he landed?
Exactly.
And you've got another intriguing piece of information, haven't you, that was brought to you by a local metal detectorist?
We have, Tony. It was found in 2012, a very recent and very exciting find. These helmets dating to this period are very, very rare. This is 2,000 years old. This would have been worn by one of the adversaries in the battles against Caesar.
Well, you must have thought that all your dreams had come true when that was passed to you. And this is what it would have looked like originally, yeah?
That's right. We have this replica, which is coming to light. Now,
dare I try it on?
Yeah, well, indeed, Tony.
How do I look?
Well, it fits you, but you're wearing it back to front.
Sorry, I thought it was like a school cap. Oh, so this is to protect the neck?
It's to protect the neck.
Yeah.
Correct, yes.
I love the idea of me looking down upon the enemy, surrounded by my mates with the sun glittering on our helmets.
That's right, and that would have been very intimidating.
I think my enemy would have been really scared of me.
The Romans did eventually conquer Britain in 44 AD and ruled for nearly 4 centuries. They gave us new towns, canals, viaducts, and would have used the very track I'm walking on before building their own roads, hard and straight, across the countryside. The North Downs Way is entangled in the legacy of the Roman occupation. Yet sometimes it isn't the great monuments, but the tiny clues that reveal something extraordinary about this ancient track. Stepping back onto the North Downs Way, I'm struck by how these wonderful ancient tracks channel the imagination about the people who travelled these paths before me. Every step could be the step of a Christian pilgrim, or a Roman centurion, or even an ancient Briton. After leaving Bigbury, I find myself thinking about what the Romans left behind in Britain. And near the Saxon village of Charing, an unexpected trace of the Romans still lurks in the undergrowth. Normally along here on the track, you can find intriguing creatures, but knowing my luck, I'll not be able to find any now.
Triumph, I've found them. Look, there's one there, isn't it massive? Another one under here. There's one over here too. Oh, crowds of them. Not allowed to touch them because they're of special scientific interest, but they're called pot-lid snails, or sometimes apple snails, presumably because of their size. And until fairly recently, people thought that they'd been brought here by the Normans as a snack for pilgrims who were going up and down the Pilgrim's Way. But it now seems pretty sure that actually they were introduced by the Romans. There are certainly a lot of them associated with Roman sites. You can't prove anything for certain, can you? But that seems to be the case.
Sadly, in modern times, these Roman snails are being poached as a delicacy, and many of their native habitats are now kept secret by conservationists. The idea that it was pilgrims who first brought these snails to Britain is one of the many myths of the North Downs Way. I'm meeting a local writer who's dedicated his life to debunking the myths of this old road.
Do you think the Pilgrim's Way was originated by pilgrims?
No, I think all the evidence that historians and archaeologists have concluded that it was a prehistoric trackway. One of the things that happens in the pilgrim's narrative is that the pilgrimists build and exaggerate each other's stories. So we start with numbers of pilgrims, then we build on that, and we have thousands of pilgrims and end up with 100,000 pilgrims, medieval pilgrims, using the Pilgrim's Way.
So in prehistoric times, you've got people coming maybe from as far as France using this pathway to trade tin and copper and chert or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it falls into disuse, and then the pilgrims start to use it. Then you get Thomas à Becket, so many more pilgrims are using it. Then after the Reformation, it falls into disuse again. And then towards the end of the Victorian times, suddenly these writers seize on the romantic notion of the Pilgrim's Way, and here it is now, brought back to life.
Yeah, and for me, one of the interesting things about that is perhaps we have as many pilgrims walking the Pilgrim's Way today as we did in the Middle Ages, using it as a route to Becket Shrine.
And we're two of them.
Yes.
I'm a different kind of pilgrim. My journey is taking me in the opposite direction.
It's funny, though, wherever you are on this pathway, there's always some sort of religious symbol nearby.
But I'm leaving Christianity behind, in search of a time before the Pilgrims, before the Romans, to find a prehistoric place that holds clues to our Stone Age past. Some of the earliest human remains known in Britain have been found in this area. This is the epic landscape of the Medway megaliths. These mysterious structures are the only group of megaliths in eastern England, and like much from prehistory, are steeped in folklore. The first I encounter on Bluebell Hill are the fallen stones of a Neolithic burial chamber that have puzzled the locals for centuries.
It's said that it's impossible to count the number of stones on a megalithic structure. These ones are called the countless stones, and you can sort of see the problem. Little stones would get buried under the big ones, some stones would be under the earth and only occasionally reappear. In fact, there's a story about these stones, which is that there was this smart baker who decided he would work out how to count the stones. He baked a whole lot of loaves of bread, and he put one loaf of bread on each stone. Now, the punchline of the story is, there you are, there's the last one, that the devil was coming all the way round behind the baker and he was gobbling up the loaves. So when the baker turned round, he'd no idea how many there were. Another version has it that the devil took just one away, so he got the count wrong. Another says that the devil disguised himself as a loaf. Hello! And again, the baker got the number wrong. The fourth one is the most dramatic. He gets the number right, the crowd gathered all around him, and just as he's about to announce what the number is, he keels over and dies. That was pretty realistic, wasn't it? Except that now I've got to go around again and put all the loaves away.
The story of the countless stones is only a bit of fun, but later generations have always projected their legends onto these stones because in the mists of time, their original power and purpose has been lost.
Hi, Chris.
Oh, hello. You're not lost, are you?
You know I'm not lost. I want to glean from you your fantastic story. Chris lives over there in that lovely house, and at the bottom of his field is this wonderful stone, which is a stone of great significance.
It is indeed, because this is the White Horse Stone of Kent.
Yeah.
5,500 years old, like all the other graves in the area.
But there's a story associated with this one.
Oh, yes, this is a little bit special, this stone, because many years after it was used by the Neolithic people, it was used by the Saxons, who first arrived in the country about 455 AD. And what happened was the Saxons landed, they wandered round in Kent for a couple of weeks, and they ended up here.
Which marks the site of a very important battle which may well have taken place in that field.
Oh, indeed, yes, that's right. There was a huge battle between the Saxons and the Britons, and the leaders were Vortigern on the British side and his son Catigan. On the Saxon side, they were the brothers Horsa and Hengist.
So on one hand, you've got the newcomers, the Saxons, led by Hengist and Horsa, and on the other side, you've got the Romano-British, who were here after the Romans left.
Absolutely, yes. The battle was dramatic. Many hundreds of people were killed on both sides. Very big battle. And both of the chieftains, or kings, were killed as well. Horsa, the Saxon king, as he lay dying, was put on top of the White Horse Stone, and that his blood stained the stone bright red. which means that even today the flag of Kent is a white horse on a red background.
And all because of this stone.
All because of this stone that you see here, yes. Amazing.
Thank you. See you.
It is amazing, this intoxicating mix of myth and history projected onto stones placed here thousands of years ago. Just a short walk away are the last of the megaliths, older than Stonehenge, the oddly framed Kit's Coty.
Around here, you've got the only collection of prehistoric megaliths in eastern England. Megaliths just means large stones, but these ones are the entranceway to a huge barrow that stretched 70 metres in that direction, and inside it there were a lot of burials. Now you can see it's surrounded by this metal fence, and that was put up by the Victorians to try and make sure that it didn't get covered in graffiti. But can you show them all that graffiti there? That's Victorian, so it kind of failed. And instead, what you've got is 3 large stones surrounded by a monument to Victorian wrought ironwork.
It's such a Victorian thing to do, to build a fence to simply keep people away. But my journey on the North Downs Way will take me to the home of a quite extraordinary Victorian mind. One who would take us even further back in time, to the beginning of life on Earth. I'm crossing the River Medway in Kent to continue my journey along the North Downs Way. I've come a long way from the travellers on the Pilgrim's Road to Canterbury searching for a spiritual revelation. This trip, though, is a pilgrimage for me. To pay homage at a place of profound significance, a place of scientific revelation.
My last stop on the North Downs Way, it's true, it's getting hot now, is at the house of someone who knew these downs intimately and drew a conclusion from them that turned religion on its head.
Charles Darwin is one of the greatest thinkers in history, and his theories on nature made us re-examine our place in the world. In 1842, after his round-the-world trip on HMS Beagle, Darwin moved to Down House, just off the North Downs Way.
Down this corridor is something I've always wanted to see. It's behind this door. Come in. This is the study that belonged to Charles Darwin, the Charles Darwin. I suppose you'd have expected all this kind of bric-a-brac on the walls, the maps and the skulls and the books. This dog basket belonged to his little white terrier called Polly, who'd lie curled up here while he did his work. And I love this detail. Come over here. Have a look in there. This is where Charles Darwin did his ablutions, his shower and washing his hands and his potty and everything. You don't think of him doing that kind of thing, do you? And this is his table with his microscope on it and lots of string holders for some reason, tickets and notes. And he would sit here overlooked by some of the greats of his age, like a kid's pop posters on their bedroom wall. That's Hooker, the biologist, that's Lyell, the geologist. That is Josiah Wedgwood, the pottery manufacturer who was his grandfather and whose money, of course, helped fund this whole project. And it was here that Charles Darwin wrote a book that transformed our understanding of us within the universe. And that book was The Origin of Species. And he wrote it here. I think that's really exciting. Darwin's book, The Origin of Species, marked a dramatic turning point in scientific thought. That life on Earth was a process of evolution and not an act of God. From Down House, Darwin could gaze upon the North Downs and reflect on the experiments that he'd created to test his theories. What he developed in the house was put into practice on his walks outdoors. One of the things that virtually all writers and philosophers and poets agree on is that walking helps you think. In fact, in some languages, the word for travelling is the same as the word for thinking. Darwin even created his own trackway in the grounds of the house, and he regularly walked this circular path, including 5 times at lunchtime. But in order to keep track on the number of times he'd been round, he had a pocket full of stones, and at the end of each circumlocution he would put a stone down, which ought to have worked really well, except his kids would come along and kick the stones and chuck them away, so his system was completely blown. Nevertheless, some of his greatest ideas emerged on this very path. Irene!
Hello.
The orchid lady, how nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too.
Show me some of your blooms.
I'm not sure you want to come into a hot greenhouse on a sunny day like this.
No, it is a
There
bit
we are.
mad.
Yes.
They do look lovely, don't they?
But, of course, Darwin was famous for his orchid studies because the first book that he wrote after The Origin of Species was about orchids. And that was where he learnt that orchids are very different from most other flowers, how they have rather specialised adaptations. They don't have stamens like other flowers. They have strange pollen sacs on little stalks.
The idea that flowers had some kind of sexuality must have been quite difficult for the Victorians.
It was very difficult for Darwin too, because it was highly controversial, shocking even. And people who started to try to hybridise orchids or said that they had sexual parts were almost excommunicated. So he was on very tricky ground when he started his work on orchids.
How did he get away with it?
Well, Darwin got round this very neatly by saying that the insects that pollinated flowers were acting as marriage priests, which is a very charming way of explaining it all.
Cute,
Isn't that lovely? Yes.
He didn't just experiment inside his greenhouse, though, did he?
No. One of the places that we know he went to regularly was a small grassy slope, and hopefully we'll show you some of the wild orchids that grow there.
Hopefully. Let's go. Let's go. After travelling the world in search of clues, it was at home on the North Downs that Darwin discovered some startling evidence to support his theory of evolution. So what was the experiment that he did?
I'll show you one of these orchids. These orchids are all pollinated by insects. So having looked at this flower, Darwin decided to mimic an insect and took a pencil.
Yeah.
And he probed into the flower deeply. And then when he withdrew it, to his astonishment, on the pencil were a pair of little stalked pollen sacs, the orchid's pollinia.
So it was opening itself up in a very sexual way to the bee.
Yes.
So that the bee could then take the pollen, move off to another orchid and
Yes.
fertilise that one.
And what happens is the bees are a bit put out by this.
Yeah.
You know, suddenly on their head, these strange club-shaped structures are stuck on,
Yeah.
and you can watch them backing away, and they're so disturbed that they very often fly to a completely different plant, really then ensuring cross-fertilisation between 2 separate plants. So it's a remarkable adaptation.
I do find it absolutely extraordinary that there is this beautiful, tiny, discreet bit of Kent countryside and these lovely, elegant little flowers. And they opened up our understanding of evolution and natural selection. I've been on a journey exploring faith and superstition. But there's a nice irony I love here.
I've ended up with a great man of science and reason. Charles Darwin was a traveller on a quest for knowledge and the answer to the fundamental questions of our existence. The North Downs Trackway was formed by the footsteps of thousands of people who made their own journey, traders, invaders and pilgrims. And today we still walk this path, partly to pay homage to all its previous travellers, and partly, like pilgrims, to continue the search for something of our own. You see a path like this one, and it feels like it's been here forever, doesn't it? But, of course, every path starts with someone wanting to go from A to B across virgin territory, and then someone else goes in the same direction, and someone else, until hundreds and thousands of people have done it, and it's worn and there in the landscape. And then maybe, after a while, people don't want to walk that way anymore, and it starts to fall into disuse, and eventually you can hardly see it. And then maybe hundreds of years after that, someone else wants to go from A to B for an entirely different reason, and then more people do and more people do, until eventually it's like a huge scar. It's become part of our country, part of our landscape, part of our culture.
Well, our Knight of the Road discovers how a country's fortunes were turned round by the discovery of gold. Tony Robinson down under, next on More 4. Tomorrow at 8, Tim and Prue cross the Scottish Highlands along the Caledonian Canal in great canal journeys. Next tonight, our feline friends tackle those letters and numbers.